My name is Jason Levine, better known as Fluency MC, and I have the great honor and privilege of hosting this monthly webinar series brought to you by the American TESOL Institute. So whether you are a new teacher, just getting started, perhaps you haven't even been in the classroom yet, or all the way up to seasoned folks like myself, that's a great euphemism, seasoned, senior, old, teachers with many years of experience. And it doesn't matter if you're teaching young learners, adults, different levels, these webinars are aimed at everyone. So that means my job is to, along the way, point out and mention when I think something may be more pertinent to an adult or a learner, a younger learner, different levels, etc. But trying to focus on the most important content for everyone, no matter who you are, where you are, whom you're teaching. So today we're going to look at phrasal verbs and idioms, such an important area in language learning, generally idioms, but English in particular with phrasal verbs. So we'll get into that very quickly. If you're here live, welcome. You're free to, you're encouraged to put questions and comments in the chat, although I will not directly answer them if they're questions or comment back if they're comments, but at the end there will be time if you're here live to ask questions. So if it helps you to put them in there, and then I can look later, or you can wait until the end. If you are watching asynchronously, thank you also for being here. And everyone, please share this video where, if you found it on Facebook, YouTube, wherever American TESOL Institute has it. And you are free to contact me if you have questions about it. I'm also happy to share the slides with you. I'll give you my email at the end. If you know me, Fluency MC, or you don't know me, either way, I want to tell you that I make songs to practice different things in English, and I do a lot with phrasal verbs. So yeah, if you know me, I just want to remind you that this is a big area for me, phrasal verbs, idioms, and there's a good reason. The most important thing is that our learners, and this is any age, right, any level, get these very important structures in their heads. And I believe that happens mainly through meaningful repetition and more fun acquisition through repetition, not studying. So that's going to be a theme that runs throughout, certainly not an idea that's unique to me. I think most people who have worked with students with phrasal verbs and idioms have discovered that the best way is not studying them, but getting a lot of repetition with them, especially meaningful repetition in context. But that's something we're going to keep talking about today. But before we go further, let's start with what an idiom even is. And I've chosen a definition that will be understandable by most English learners. You could always translate it at the beginning. Certainly an idiom is not unfamiliar to anyone, no matter what language they have. You can compare idioms in English with an idiom in the first language of the learner. So I think that's the best way to start. And sometimes they're similar, sometimes they're different, they're funny, they're weird. So it's a great thing to talk about. A phrase that when you look at it on the surface means one thing and doesn't really make any sense, right? Because it's being used for a different purpose. So for example, in English, if you say you feel under the weather, you don't feel well, you feel sick. Is that the same in your learner's first language? So that's one thing you could talk about. If you're sick in Portuguese or Mandarin, what's the most common thing you could say? Under the weather is very, very common in English. And the frequency of idioms, wow, super important. So that's going to be something else we're talking about a lot. So it could be funny, right? Under the weather, it could be like you are, under the rain, right? If that were the case, it would not be idiomatic, right? So the meaning changes. Every language, as far as I know, has idioms. But not every language has phrasal verbs. I might be wrong, but I think the closest one is German. And we're not talking here about a verb plus a preposition complement. We're going to look at the difference right now. If we're talking about verbs with particles, prepositions, or adverbial particles, that is common in other languages, especially languages derived from Latin and German. I like this definition because I think it's good for teachers and learners to make it clear that the meaning changes and not to worry so much about, what is that word that changes the meaning or words, right? We usually call it a particle. It could be a preposition or it could be an adverbial particle. That kind of language doesn't really help most learners, even adults, which we'll talk about soon. So the question is, right, what is that verb and why do those words that get added change the meaning as far as learners first understanding what a phrasal verb is, like the form of the word? So here's a good example, I think. You have the verb look. Now, with look, you don't look something, so it's intransitive. We need a preposition. And so you can't look something, you can look at the sky. Okay, so look always has at with it. When you have look at the sky, is that a phrasal verb? No, that is a verb plus a preposition complement. So this is something really important for teachers to know. How, if, and how you communicate this to students, that's something we're going to talk about. But for now, let's just look at this as something for you to understand that look at the sky, the meaning of look does not change. In fact, we need at as a preposition because we can't say look the sky. So look at is something to remember as one chunk. But if we look up a word, are we looking up the word, up at the word? If you look up a word, I think we agree that really changes the meaning of look, right? We're certainly not looking at the word, but we're also not looking up in the direction of a word. The meaning here would be to find a meaning of a word in a dictionary, right? To look in a reference tool to find a word and the word's meaning. So how would we teach that? Start thinking about that. We're going to get to that. What about look up to my sister? Oh, we put another word here. So and we have a multi-word phrasal verb. That's not even the best word. Anyway, I don't like that stuff. Like we said, one or more words. But yeah, look up to my sister. Again, is it literal look up to? No, I could look up to the sky, maybe. And then that's still phrasal verb, right? Because the meaning of look is not just look at, it's now a direction, but we add to and it becomes more idiomatic. And this is where synonyms, because look up a word is a little harder. If you have a one word synonym, you want to use it, right? So like admire. And as I said, English is particulier, as we say in French. I'm in Paris, because of these phrasal verbs. A one-word verb in French is used, so that's true in basically every language. So you want to find what, if you can, what is that one word in English? Oh, respect, admire, especially admire. And, you could translate that back into the first language if that helps or not. So how to teach these, I'm not talking about that yet as much as just looking at the form. What is a phrasal verb compared to a normal verb? It's the same slide we just saw, except look, I highlighted something. Did you even notice that there's a idiomatic phrasal verb here? Now, they're always idiomatic in a sense, but like really idiomatic, right? Takes on a new meaning. Now, in the context, and this is why I did this, did you need to did you need to think about the fact that there was this verb take, this word on, and when we put on with take, there was a new meaning. So a verb that acquires a new meaning, acquire is pretty good for take on. But in the context, do you think well, you certainly as a teacher didn't need to think about it, but what about a student even? A verb that takes on a new meaning. You could say, what does takes on mean? It means acquires. But certain level of English, just the context might be enough, right? So when do you focus on phrasal verbs and idioms and when do you not, and just sort of let them happen in context? That's something I want us to think about. So here is basically what I've been saying. When and how should you focus on phrasal verbs and idioms with your students? At this point, I just want you to think about that, and also because it certainly depends on their level of English and what you're teaching them and what they need English for. So just start thinking about this as we go along. Another one that's not a mistake. This is also just to show you that verbs plus prepositions and particles are everywhere, but is focus on a phrasal verb in the sense that the meaning changes. I think this is more like look at, right? Because we can't say focus something, focus on something. Focus on is the entire meaning, the basic meaning of focus. So that would not be considered a phrasal verb. Now, should your students think about what the difference is here? In most cases, I think no, especially kids. But and adults too, as they start to think more about how the language works, it might be interesting for them, but it could also interfere with just remembering and using these verbs. So when and how to teach them and which ones. So I want to start with which ones first. Frequency, to me, is everything. So in many books, you'll find it's raining cats and dogs, and you won't find it's pouring out, or it's coming down hard. So if you look at a corpus of English, you will find that it's pouring out there, or it's coming down hard. Those are idiomatic expressions that are much more common than it's raining cats and dogs. So I think, I want you to answer this question for yourself, and what I say is just my opinion, but with a lot of teaching experience, that figuring out which idiom is the most common that your student is most likely going to hear or read is more important than which one might be in a book or on a list. So the one caveat I have here is that raining cats and dogs is such a cool expression, such a weird one, that it could be the one to teach first if you want to talk about, colorful idioms and how idioms can be cool. But if a student remembers it's raining cats and dogs and doesn't remember it's pouring out, we've got a little problem in everyday communication, because they could be at a job doing an internship, standing in the elevator, and somebody says, wow, it's really pouring out or coming down out there, and they don't understand. Or they could say rather awkwardly, oh, it's raining cats and dogs, which it's not something we say so much, so it's a little hard to pull it off naturally compared to a more high frequency idiom. Wake up and have a blast. Which one do you think is more important? So certainly if you're talking about kids, young learners, all the way through adults, wake up. This is everyday English. And would you even teach it as a phrasal verb? What do you do in the morning? Awaken So we don't usually use the single verb, single word verb, and that's a really important thing to consider when a phrasal verb is much more common than a one word verb. And I just realized here another mistake. When and how would you teach this phrasal verb and an idiom? So have a blast is not a phrasal verb. So allow me to do one thing. The reason I'm doing this, guys, is also for your colleagues. So because oops, let me see. So thank you, bear with me. When I give you the slides or when I share the video, right? So I'm going to go back and change what I'm saying now. So the video will not have this part in it. I'm just talking to you guys live. So how would you teach this phrasal verb and this idiom? Yeah, and that's really what I wanted to say. You'll see why in a moment. Okay, so here we have a common phrasal verb and a common idiom. So when and how would you teach them? Wake up, to me, is a phrasal verb that, because it's so much more common than this single verb, is something that should probably not even be thought of or talked about as a phrasal verb, except in certain situations where maybe you want to show other phrasal verbs with up, and how that might help students, sort of the contextual metaphor idea, which I'll talk about again, help them kind of understand the meaning of up. But otherwise, do we say, I don't even know as a native speaker, is it like awaken, right? What time do you awake? Awoken? So this is a really important point, that when, in terms of when to teach a phrasal verb, when a phrasal verb is much more common than the single verb, and in English that happens a lot. For example, do you discard something or throw it away? You throw it out, throw it away. That those you would teach sooner rather than later, because that's the one they're going to hear in everyday situations. So every day we wake up, every day we throw things away, pick it up, put it on, take it off. These kind of phrasal verbs we're going to talk about more in a moment. The really common ones. How would you teach it? I think you're just going to teach it in the context of, daily routines. When do you wake up, right? Again, this is my opinion, but it's not going to be, teaching lists of phrasal verbs. This one would come much earlier, as you're talking about daily routines. Now, have a blast. How common is this? Certainly have fun. Did you have fun at the party? Oh, we had a blast. I would do have fun before have a blast. Now, is have fun an idiom? Again, these are on a continuum. So you don't have fun in the sense of, having money or having, a pen in your hand. Have is a delexicalized verb, which we're going to talk more about today. So have fun would be more important. But if you really have fun, oh, you have a blast. This is also more common for adolescents and adults. So you need to think about the age of your students and also their level. So, have fun before have a blast. So I have a bunch of a list, basically. I numbered it with what I hear a lot from different teachers and books about teaching idioms and phrasal verbs. So these are numbered, but the numbers don't mean anything. So I just want you to think about these things as we continue. Number one, I've already referred to, I think, right? It's not always possible to provide like a exact word, a synonym, but it's always, pretty much always, excuse me, easy to think of a single unit of meaning. So under the weather, being sick, look something up, find it in a dictionary. We haven't even talked about the grammar of phrasal verbs yet, because I strongly believe that that is not something to do. At the beginning, I said that it's just repetition, getting these structures in your head, not thinking about the grammar of them. So I'll give you my opinion on these. Right? I don't think we should focus on this, number two. And if you're not even sure what I mean, we'll look at it together soon. Categories. That you find this a lot if you look on the internet, right, or in books where you see lists of idioms, color, and time. Well, in real life, right, we are because the color idioms have different meanings. Idioms that have the word time in it or something with time. This is not how we function in real life communication. So I don't think the categories are good, but we'll talk about this again, and you can decide yourself. Number four, wow, this is one of the myths of phrasal verbs. There's another one here, that this is an advanced level thing. Think about wake up. So if you're talking about are they transitive or intransitive, separable, inseparable, certainly that's advanced levels if you do it at all. But don't make the mistake of thinking, oh, phrasal verbs, and I didn't write idioms here, are for only advanced levels. No, you need to think, what are the phrasal verbs and idioms that are everyday English for your learners? That's the big one, and we're going to go into that just after we finish this list. I think number five is huge, right? Context for any new vocabulary, but especially phrasal verbs and idioms. If you can find a synonym, we talked about if a word takes on meaning, acquires meaning. If you say throw it away, and in other languages there's one verb usually, right? Is that discard, dispose of? So maybe that can help, or translating it can sometimes help too. You can judge for yourself after this webinar what you think about lists of idioms and phrasal verbs. Generally, I don't think that's the way to go. Unless you're going to take that list, if the list is for yourself, and you take that list and you put it in a game or a song or in some activity, then that's different. But students using lists, I don't think is the best. Using them in sentences, sure. Number 9 is the 3 myths. I forgot about the third one. Do you think this is a good thing to do? I think this connects to that idea of if you put them under the microscope, separable, inseparable, transitive, intransitive. Oh, there's so many of them. They look the same, so idiomatic. But that's the list idea. That's overwhelming, right? But in context, right? Is wake up difficult to learn? So if wake up is not difficult to learn, I think focusing on that, because we talked about it, it's such a great example. If a student says, oh, I don't understand phrasal verbs, or I don't know phrasal verbs, well, do you know wake up? Do you know put on your glasses? Turn on the light, turn it off. Those are so high frequency that they're not as difficult. Other ones, not necessarily more difficult, just you need more frequency, more repetition, and the brain will catch it. So 10 is another list idea. I think a list like this for you is good. And what about the particles? Can we only list by the verb? No. We could also have lists. This is number 11, right? It could be lists with all the verbs with up, in, off. We're going to talk about that. So focus on the meaning of particles. This is a tricky one. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. So in my experience, so we're going to talk about that. And 12 is the other myth. Informal only. Just look at everyday formal English, for example, in a newspaper, if we call that formal, like a formal type of writing, newspaper, even contracts, legal contracts, academic English, right? You would expect not to see them as much, but you do. Research papers. Again, it depends on which ones they are. Certainly, there are phrasal verbs that are much, much more common in speech, but sorry, in formal speech, but also formal speech and writing. We need to look at something like this because you will find things like this. And the question is, how useful is this? So what does it mean, common? So you have to be careful, right? I mean, there's always your learners, their needs. But beyond that, is this really a list of common, meaning we say them now in English usually? Certainly some of them, all things considered, on the same page. Ooh, good ones. Out of work. But how about, I'm looking at, wet behind the ears, pain an arm and a leg, not so common. Stiff-necked. Whoa, I'd have to ask speakers of other varieties of English than American, British, Australian, but that is not something. Eat someone's lunch. So you need to be selective, obviously. Do you just pull them off lists, or do you teach them as they come up in what you're doing with your students? I think that's the best way. But the other thing is to consider what's better, a colorful idiom, we saw some on the other page, or idioms like this, which include a lot of phrasal verbs. So you can see how, phrasal verbs and idioms are in, right? This is, to me, better for a teacher to look at, to start thinking, oh, okay, maybe the colorful idioms are not the first types of idiomatic expressions. Maybe things like this are more important. Well, I definitely agree with you. So I like this list because it does, what are the most frequently? I mean, if you want a better answer, Gen AI, right? A large language model like ChatGPT, so good for this, right? Because remember, they, may not be so accurate with facts, information, but they are large language models. So they train on the most frequent language available. So if you ask ChatGPT to give you a list of idioms, it might start with those colorful ones, and you can say, okay, I'm not talking about raining cats and dogs. I'm talking about the most common idiomatic phrasal verbs, or you could give ChatGPT a couple of these. Then you're going to see better frequency list based on language corpora. I made this list when I was teaching a group of young adults, and I based this on what I saw, what was in the materials, things that were not that I saw that they needed, mistakes they made where they really needed an expression. So this is not something that I gave them. It's just something I put together. If you look at it, especially American English, I hope you agree that these are very, very common. This is not like this perfect list, remember. This is just a list that I made at a certain time. There's some things on here I'd probably always put on a list for young adults. And the reason I have this list here too, and again, I can send you the slides so you can have this list and compare it to ones you make. But I made this list not thinking about the colorful idioms versus non-colorful so much, but these are the ones I'd put in the colorful idiom category. So not that many, right? It doesn't mean that the other ones aren't idiomatic. I mean, the idea is that everything here is basically idiomatic in a way, but they're not, so far, things like it doesn't ring a bell, where you couldn't figure it out, definitely couldn't figure it out from the context. I mean, certain things, right? Especially ones that have phrasal verbs in them, I think, like we broke up, in the context, oh, my girlfriend and I broke up. And speaking of phrasal verbs, look how many of these have phrasal verbs in them. So there's this overlap with, if you're thinking phrasal verbs and idioms are somehow different, I think this illustrates how they are not. There's a connection here. And the thing about phrasal verbs and idioms, if they are super common, is that we have them in chunks. We expect them. She figured it, right? We don't think about in, on, up, or right the particle. In traffic. This is so high frequency that an advanced learner or a native speaker would just know the answer. So I'm not saying I think you probably know how to fill these. Oop, I thought I had the slide where we see it. Okay, she figured it out. He got stuck in traffic. I think I'm going crazy. So those are so high frequency and so important that, right, anybody can quickly put it there. It's a chunk of language, right? We're not thinking about what does this word mean or that word mean. So here, let me explain it with this example. What does take mean? Would you really explain that? Now, a student might ask, what does take mean? What does get mean? Modal verbs are common. What does would mean or as? Okay, but let's not digress. Verbs. Would you explain what take means? I think the best way is to explain it through collocations, through chunks. And we can see a continuum as far as how idiomatic, right? Take my hand is not so idiomatic, right? Actually take it. But take a trip, take a shower, take it easy, take off your shoes. These are super high frequency expressions. Do we want to break apart the meaning, or do we want to think again about some, one meaning, if possible, a synonym, or a similar phrase? Take a trip, right? Oh, go on a trip, go trip. Okay, that's a little easier. So it's the same as go on a trip, take a trip. Take a shower. Well, UK English, I think it's more common to have a shower than take a shower. Oh, so have a shower and take a shower. The word have and take are not important here. What's important is the whole thing, because have a shower and take a shower mean the same thing. Take it easy, that's more idiomatic for sure, right? Just relax. So this could be overwhelming. This is where we get that myth of like, oh, phrasal verbs, idioms are hard to understand. Well, yeah, if you make a list of all the ones with take, but that's not how this would happen. This is just illustration for you as teachers training how this works. So it could be good for an upper level student to see, but the best thing, right, would not be to put these together when you're in the context of something. Oh, put on your shoes, take off, for example, or you're talking about the function of greeting people, saying hello, goodbye. Oh, take it easy, see you later, or just take it easy, relax. So it's the chunks. It's not the separate meaning of words. I mean, the whole idea of what an idiom is in the first place, right, is when you put words together and it forms a new meaning, or phrasal verbs. So, of course, we should teach these as chunks. They're chunks to begin with. So this is, I think, the opposite, and is not what we do. Now, should you know this? I think so. Can the verb take an object? For example, I have a pen. I can put the pen down, put down the pen. Okay, so yes, it can take an object. But do all phrasal verbs take an object? No, they don't, right? So I'm going to sign on to do a project. I'm going to sign on a project. So they don't always have objects. So no, human or non-human objects. Some of them could be one or the other. Must the object come before the particle, after the particle? So this one, put the pen down. But would I say put down the pen? Maybe, but usually, right, put it down. Put it down, pick it up. Put down it. So this is where it gets confusing only if you start putting it under the microscope. Okay? So these are questions for you to consider. And just looking at the time, I don't want to go into it too deeply. But let's go back to wake up, right? So wake up, you can wake up in the morning. That's intransitive. But you can wake someone up. Oh, so it can have an object, right? But examples with wake up, we can answer all these questions without thinking about separable, inseparable, for example. So can I wake someone up? Yes, I can. Wake up someone? Yes, right? So it's the examples without going into the detail of how it works syntactically. It's all about semantics, right? I think the meaning is most important, but important for you to know this, especially if you teach adult learners and they ask about this, then you need to explain it, be able to explain it. So I have a story here to support my opinion about having an approach that's more about getting meaningful repetition with phrasal verbs rather than trying to study them and pick them apart as a way to remember them. So we have a family friend. She has a son named Aiden, and he's older now, but when he was probably 3 years old, something like that, 4 years old, I was with him in his apartment. He was playing with his toy soldiers, and he said to me, Jason, look, my soldiers are cold, so I'm going to take this blanket, and I'm going to take the blanket and see on my soldiers. The soldiers need the blanket. I'm going to, I think you may have said like, put the blanket on them. So he had that phrasal verb, put the blanket on my soldiers. And I said, oh, yes, you're going to cover them up, right? And when I said, you're going to cover them up, this is what he said. Yes, I'm going to cover up the soldiers. Look, I'm covering them up. He repeated that. Why? It's almost like a trance, right? Like, yes, I'm going to cover up the soldiers. Look, I'm covering them up. Right? Because he needs that phrasal verb. It boom, right into his, because he already knew probably, some other ones. It's like, this is how English works. These are so important. He's not thinking about separable, inseparable, or using pronouns, but look what he did. I'm going to cover up the soldiers. He didn't say, I'm covering up them. So that fit nicely into what he's already been learning with phrasal verbs, okay, not consciously. So if you're thinking, but my students are not 4 years old, they're not native speakers. Exactly. But that does not mean that they shouldn't learn through repetition. So easier when it's your native language and you are a kid who's not thinking about the grammar here to acquire them, and moreover, you're hearing English all the time. You're learning English as your first language. Okay, but how can we simulate situations where students at any age, even adults, are getting enough repetition so that we are creating the same kind of situation for them as Aiden has for himself? So as teachers, we need to think about frequency, for sure, right? So we need to think about this is frequency of the verbs and the particles. So I'm focusing on phrasal verbs now. Why? Because this is, I think, much more important. Idioms, fixed expressions, for you can choose to teach at what point they come up. Great, but phrasal verbs are different because they don't exist in other languages, and I believe this idea of getting them through repetition, meaningful repetition, works so much better than other ways you might learn to teach phrasal verbs. So let me show you what I mean. So first is knowing the most common verbs, because you can have a phrasal verb dictionary. Oh my God, there's so many there. Okay, so yes, others will come up. For example, cover up. Cover is not on this list because there are not so many phrasal verbs with cover that are common. But there are many with these verbs. So I think that's an important place to start. Just to show you, again, the list of phrasal verbs that were on my idiom list. Let's look at how many of them were in that category. So there was a lot with break, come, and get, but a lot of other ones, not just those three. So it's important to know the verbs that are most common, but there's something else that's more important. For example, here, so wait, give me a second on that. What's more important? That's coming. But for example, on this list, for basic phrasal verbs that we need every day, this is a list, remember, that's more for my adult learners, a little more. If we're talking about the basics, these four are, more important probably than the others. I have a video about these, right? So if we go back, right? Oh, so pick it up, right? Put it down, put it in, take it out, turn it on, turn it off. Like I would start with those. And there's a video if you want to check it out. And the body language, right? Take it off, put it on, put it down, pick it up. The repetition with that. If you are Aiden, you don't need that so much, right? Because it's your first language, but our students need something. And if that video, that song is better for kids up to around 13 years old, which I think it is, what do you do with 14 and older? Well, I have more songs that are better for older kids. Just search for me and phrasal verbs. I did one in particular that I think you'll like for older, like high school kids, recently, and that one is with simple English videos. So if you look for phrasal verb simple English videos, and another one, which I'll show you in a moment, that's good for, I think, all ages. This is more important, I think, not thinking about which, it's good to know which verbs are common, but it's even more important to notice which particles are important, because there are so many particles, but in, out, on, off, up, down. Hands down, these are the most common. And if we look at my list again, this is from that big list. Now we see something much more interesting. So many with out and up. I would put up as the first, probably. And the great thing about that is what I referred to earlier, and now let's talk about, which is, can we imagine, this is the contextual metaphor idea, some feeling of what it means out and up. And if we look at a list, this can help. Again, think about the age and level of your learners, but let's look at up for a moment. If I say, you need to hurry up, right? Or, it's starting to clear up. Look at the process of something happening to completion, right? So for example, if I say, okay, it's time to go, eat up your dinner, finish it, right? But to be honest, I don't do a lot of that. What I would do is, I still think that can be inferred, can happen not consciously. So in my experience, talking about meanings even of particles is not key. But what is key, I hope we all agree, is it's not the verb that's as most as common as trying to get practice with them together in with the particles. So for example, I have this song that I mentioned, I didn't tell you, called That's What's Up. So this is a great example, I think, where it's all, I'll do a little bit for you. So it goes, open up your eyes, it's time to wake up, sit up in your chair, better yet, stand up, get up, jump up, and your hands, put them up, raise them up, hold them up. So the song doesn't talk about what up means. I mentioned that idea of it could be up physically, or we talked about that earlier, or, like look up, or even look up to, admire. But charge it up is more to completion. Anyway, I don't talk about that in the video, but students who watch this video and practice with it, I think, are getting that feeling, even though we're not talking about it. And that feeling is what a native speaker, like my example with Aiden, would have. Cover up the soldiers, like cover them up completely. That's not something we're teaching him or he's even thinking about, but he's internalizing. So now we have only 10 minutes, but that's okay. I have my top tips. I said these were top tips, and here they are. They're at the end. But that's okay, because we've talked about all of these things already today. So I think I have 12 tips here. Here we go. I'll let you read it. I don't need to read it out loud. While you're reading it, I'll explain. All right. So there are so many. This is vocabulary in general, right? There's so much out there. What do your students need at this point? What are they interested in? Things like wake up, put on, take off, no matter what their needs and interests are, those are ones, and level, those are ones to do early. But then, are you training students to do something in engineering or to do something in medicine, right? What are phrasal verbs and idioms they're going to encounter and they're going to need? And then I strongly suggest doing it as you go. Not to say, okay, today's a lesson on phrasal verbs or on idioms, unless you want to introduce the idea of them. And if you do that, again, be careful. Don't go under the microscope too much, in my experience, right? So, if you're teaching the function of, asking for advice or giving advice, right? You're going to have certain high frequency phrasal verbs and idioms. What are they? Teach them along the way. Yes, so this is what I was saying also. Least idiomatic. I haven't said that, and let's think about that. So most common for sure, but if the most common is very idiomatic, then maybe not, right? But it depends. So I guess what I mean here is, something like with what do we do with phrasal verbs? So something like wake up, get up, right? These are very common and not so idiomatic. But you might decide, okay, even those, like I want to start teaching maybe look up, look down, right? So it's back to that idea of, pick it up, put it down. That up and down is more physical and not so idiomatic. So that may be the best thing to do. But if something is super common, like wake up, the fact that it's more idiomatic than, pick up, doesn't matter, right? You need to teach it, and it'll be fine in context. Speaking of context, right? Be careful with lists. We didn't talk really about multiple meanings. So if you have something like make up, you can, if you have a fight with somebody, you make up. You could make up your face. You could make up an excuse, right? You can make up an exam. That's 4 meanings right there. Definitely strongly advise against that. So a student that gets makeup, again, frequency, which one is the most frequent and important for your students? So I think, makeup and exam, in my case, with my students, definitely the first one. That they'd also make up a story, probably. Sorry. So yeah, make up an excuse and then make up an exam, just because that's in their everyday communication. But having a list of them all, that's overwhelming. Now, a dictionary, if you want to check make up and you see there's so many there, phrasal verb dictionaries can also feel overwhelming, but it also could be useful to, reference. But that's not the same thing as you need to learn this list, or the list is a way to remember. And here's the problem with putting them. We talked about this earlier. So this type of list with an explanation, what I like about it is, the pictures can help you understand the idiom. But we don't go out there and have situations where we use idioms with music, right? So it's interesting, but it's not the context. When we're talking about context, what we need more is, okay, how about let's find one that's good here. I think ring a bell, right? More advanced, but that doesn't ring a bell. Like, I don't remember in the context of like a conversation about, do you remember what happened when we had this party, or this happened? Oh, that doesn't ring a bell. Or, understanding information. Do you know this? Oh, it doesn't ring a bell. Not these are unrelated otherwise, right? So I don't think this is a way. And also here, this is a little better. The pictures I love, so I think contextualizing with pictures, or having people see pictures can help you remember. But again, these are, the idea here is, let's choose some colorful idioms, and with something, a substitute, something you can say that means the same thing, which I like. But is this going to get them in our heads? No, and I think it needs to be more in the context as you're teaching. So here we go. This is the point I'm trying to make. Right? They'll come up, right? If you've got a good story, poem, song, they're going to come up. That's a great phrasal verb. They're going to come up, right? And teaching them along the way. To me, this is the big one. It's number 6, because these are not in order of importance to me. This is the most important. Whatever the phrasal verb or idiom that they need, so that's why it's so important for you to determine what they need based on frequency in general, in language corpora, and then your students' needs, right? What are you going to do with them? Put them in a song, put them in a poem, put them in a game, put them in a video. I mean, if you can find stuff out there, if you like my songs, you don't need to make a song, but you can also make your own things. Games. This is my... I didn't put it on here. You have to remember this. Bamboozle. I'll put it when we chat at the end. I'll put it in for those of you here live. Maybe it's on the next slide. No, it's not. So usually I put it there. You have access to my games. If you go to Bamboozle, that's Bamboozle with 2 A's, BAAM. And pretty much every webinar with American TESOL Institute, I mention Bamboozle, and to follow me there and practice, because it's a great way to practice. Do repetitive practice. That's fun. We've talked about this so much today. As a unit, a chunk, right? Use a synonym, right? So if you're going to throw something out, dispose of, discard, and students will see, oh yeah, we don't really say that in English, but in my language, we use that. Oh, it sounds very formal in English. Yeah, because phrasal verbs are more common. So the chunks and then sentences. Build out from your chunk, your collocation, to your sentence. I would say only focus on the grammar of phrasal verbs if you've got adult students who are asking you about it, and then explain that you think, if you agree with me, that, okay, it's maybe you want to know, you're curious how it works grammatically, but if you want to be able to use it naturally, to get it up here, to remember it, to recognize when people say it or you read it and you use it, it's not going to be the grammar approach that's going to help you. It's going to be the meaningful repetition. I do think if you're going to do something with the grammar, as I said before, possibly the meanings with, in, up, when they're not so idiomatic, and even up for completion, because that's just such a common one. For example, please don't do this. Don't say they're hard to learn. Don't say they're only used in informal speech. Formal speech, writing, I mean, you can just see it. You'll see it. Pick up the New York Times or something like this, a formal speech. Find a very formal, political speech or presentation, and students will see the phrasal verbs are everywhere. I only like the idea of raining cats and dogs and these other colorful idioms if students like the idea of seeing what an idiom is in English. Oh, it's fun to compare it. Oh, cats and dogs. But then to move as quickly as possible to the more high frequency idioms might be one that's colorful and fun, but a lot of those fun, colorful ones are not common in everyday communication and might even seem weird or unnatural if a student uses them. It's all about the repetition. That's practicing English, the way you practice the piano or practice tennis. That's what I mean by practice here. That kind of meaningful, if it's fun, right? Not everybody likes to practice tennis, so you need to think about how to make it fun. That will build a base to then allow a student, whatever age, to use English. My credo, take a look if you don't know it already. It applies, I think, to any skill you're trying to build, sports, dance, music, and everything in a language, right? So you can today plug in phrasal verbs, idioms, but it could be anything you're trying to learn. And we all know practice makes. Nothing wrong with perfect, nothing wrong with progress, but this is the best one for me, right? Muscle memory with tennis, repetition, practice makes permanence. The brain remembers it. You can use phrasal verbs and idioms quickly that are common because you've repeated them enough in some fun way. So we need to stop here, my friends, because I want to make sure there's time if you're here live to ask questions. I'm going to wrap things up for the video, which will have the parts cut out that where I stopped and started again, so we have a pristine video that you can share with your colleagues. But yes, people who are here live, give me a moment and we can chat. So this brings us to the end of another American TESOL Institute webinar. Thanks for being here with me to talk about phrasal verbs and idioms. I am Jason Levine, better known as Fluency MC, your host. I'll be back next month for another webinar, so check the American TESOL Institute blog. Look out on social media for the next topic, day, and time. Thanks very much to everyone, all you wonderful English language teachers, wherever you are. Peace, respect, salute. Bye-bye.